A black maid solved the impossible problem in minutes, and the Mafia boss's reaction said it all. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was just another typical morning in the luxurious Valenti mansion. The marble floors shimmered under the soft glow of the chandelier, and the air smelled of freshly brewed coffee from the grand kitchen. Inside the study, the Mafia boss, Dominic Valenti, sat at his massive desk, a look of deep frustration on his face as he stared at the stacks of legal documents in front of him. He was used to being in control of everything: his family's empire, the business, the streets. But today, he faced a problem unlike any he had ever encountered before. An impossible problem that even his team of highly skilled lawyers couldn't solve. The contract was complex, with clauses designed to trap him at every turn, and he knew that without a way out, his empire could be at risk. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples, the weight of his family's legacy pressing down on him. The deadline was fast approaching, and his mind raced for a solution. Across the mansion, in a small, dimly lit room, a woman with dark skin and a quiet demeanor worked diligently. Her name was Mia, and she had been working as a maid for the Valenti family for nearly 2 years. To most of the staff, she was invisible, just another person in the background, cleaning the massive estate and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. But Mia was more than just a maid. She had spent years working for high-profile clients in different cities and had acquired knowledge of contracts, legal terms, and business dealings along the way. She was intelligent, sharp, and observant, and though she never showed it, she was always paying attention. Mia had been in the mansion's service quarters that morning when she overheard a conversation between Dominic's lawyers. They spoke in hushed tones about the contract, discussing how they could not find a way to bypass the legally binding clauses that could cost Dominic millions. The words fraudulent and impossible echoed in her mind. As she dusted the nearby bookshelf, Mia's mind raced. She had seen similar contracts before, and her instincts told her that there was a way out, a way to beat the system. With a calm and quiet resolve, she set down her cleaning supplies and made her way to the study, the place she rarely entered. The security guards nodded at her as she passed, their eyes not noticing the determination in her step. She knew what she had to do. Dominic looked up from his desk, his eyes narrowing as she entered without announcement. "Mia," he said with a hint of surprise. "What is it? Can't you see I'm busy?" Mia, never one to back down, walked up to the desk and placed a folder in front of him. "I've been listening, Mr. Valenti," she said, her voice steady, yet calm. "And I think I can help you." Dominic raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, yet curious. "Help me," he repeated, his voice laced with doubt. "You're just a maid. What do you know about contracts and business deals?" Mia didn't flinch. She calmly opened the folder and pointed to a specific clause in the contract. "This clause right here, it's flawed," she explained, her finger tracing the line. "It was designed to trap you, but if you rewrite it slightly, you'll have a legal loophole that no one will notice. It's a simple change, but it'll give you all the leverage you need." Dominic stared at the document for a long moment, the wheels turning in his head. He had a team of lawyers, some of the best in the country, yet they hadn't seen this. He had been in this business for years, but Mia's sharp mind had caught something that no one else had. "How did you?" he trailed off, shocked at her brilliance. For the first time in a long time, Dominic found himself truly impressed. He stood up from his chair, his usual cold demeanor replaced with a rare flicker of respect. "I've underestimated you, Mia," he said, his voice lower, tinged with surprise. "You've done something no one else could. This contract, you just solved it in minutes." Mia nodded, her calm exterior never changing. Sometimes, all it takes is a fresh perspective. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling in. Dominic Valenti, the powerful Mafia boss, had just been outsmarted by his maid. A maid who had proven that intelligence and quick thinking could sometimes make all the difference, even in a world built on power and dominance. And in that moment, everything shifted. Dominic knew that Mia's role in his empire was no longer just that of a maid. She had earned his trust, and with it, her place beside him in a way she had never expected. After Mia's unexpected intervention and her brilliance in solving the impossible contract problem in mere minutes, the tension in the air had shifted dramatically. Dominic Valenti, the powerful Mafia boss, had just experienced something he wasn't used to, being outsmarted by someone beneath him in social status. The respect he felt for Mia was palpable, but that respect would soon grow into something more. As the day wore on, the mansion's opulent halls and its usual buzz of activity seemed quieter, almost as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The estate was still buzzing with the news of what Mia had done, but she remained in the background, as she always had. She had never sought attention, and even now, she preferred to keep her head down and avoid the spotlight. Dominic, however, wasn't going to let this moment slip by unnoticed. Later that evening, in the quiet of the study, Dominic sat alone, staring at the documents Mia had helped him with. His mind was racing with the implications of what had just transpired. He had been in control of his world for so long, but now, for the first time in years, he felt uncertain. It wasn't about the contract, though that had been a major victory. It was about Mia. She had proven herself in a way that no one else had. As he sifted through the pages, a soft knock echoed through the room. Without looking up, Dominic's deep voice resonated. "Come in." Mia entered, her usual quiet composure in place, her gaze respectfully lowered. "Mr. Valenti," she began, her voice steady but cautious. "I just wanted to make sure everything was in order. I didn't mean to overstep." Dominic glanced up, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence, the weight of their previous encounter hanging in the air. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of the desk. "Overstep," he repeated, a slight curve in his lip that could almost be considered a smile. "Mia, you didn't just overstep. You saved me." The words hung in the air between them, and Mia felt her heart skip a beat. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had expected to be dismissed, as she always was after doing her job. Instead, Dominic continued, "I've built this empire from the ground up, and for the first time in a long while, I find myself in a position where I've been outsmarted. And it was you, Mia, who did it." His gaze softened as he leaned forward. "You've got a sharp mind. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but what you did today, that was impressive." Mia shifted uncomfortably, not used to receiving praise, especially not from someone of his stature. "Thank you, Mr. Valenti, but it was just a small thing. Anyone could have done it," she said quietly. Dominic's eyes never left hers. "No, Mia, not anyone. I've had lawyers, experts, advisors, none of them caught it. Only you." His voice was firm now, a quiet intensity laced with something else. Respect. Something that wasn't typically reserved for people like her. "You're more than just a maid. You've got the kind of mind I could use. I want you to stay." The words hit Mia like a wave. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Stay," she repeated. Dominic nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You've got skills, Mia. Skills that could be valuable in ways you can't even imagine. I'm offering you a position with my team, if you're interested. You'll have more responsibility, more trust, and most importantly, more opportunity." The room was silent for a long moment, the only sound being the soft hum of the mansion's air conditioning. Mia's mind was reeling. She had spent her life working in the background, staying invisible, keeping her head down. This offer, this change, felt like a dream. But as she looked at Dominic, his gaze unwavering and sincere, something inside her shifted. She had always known she was capable of more, but to be acknowledged for it, to be offered something that could change her life, it was overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," Mia finally whispered. Dominic smiled slightly, but there was no mockery in it, only understanding. "You don't have to say anything right now. Take your time. But know this, Mia. I trust you. And when you're ready, you'll have a place here." With that, Dominic stood, extending a hand toward her. "You've earned it." Mia hesitated for a moment, then took his hand, feeling the weight of the moment settle between them. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As she turned to leave, Dominic's voice followed her. "Mia, one last thing." She paused, glancing back at him. "If you ever doubt yourself again, remember this. The ones who are underestimated are often the ones who change everything. You've just proven that." With that, she left the room, the weight of the day finally starting to settle. Mia wasn't just a maid anymore. She was something more. She had earned not only Dominic's respect but the chance for a new life. A life where her mind and her potential could finally be put to use. As she walked down the halls of the mansion, the soft sound of her footsteps echoed behind her. But for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And for Mia, that was the beginning of something far greater than she could have ever imagined. I had just left the study, my mind spinning with the offer Dominic had made. The grand mansion, with its towering columns and sparkling chandeliers, had never felt so oppressive. Every step I took echoed through the empty halls, reminding me of just how much had changed in such a short time. I had gone from being an invisible maid to someone whom the most powerful man in the room respected, someone who was now in a position of significance. I paused by the grand staircase, looking at my reflection in the polished marble floor. I barely recognized myself. Was this really happening? Was I ready for this kind of life? The weight of it all threatened to pull me down, but before I could dwell on it any longer, a voice broke through my thoughts. Mia, wait. I turned to find Dominic walking toward me, his usual air of control replaced by something softer, more human. There was a rare warmth in his gaze that made my heart skip a beat. I know this is a lot to take in, he said, his voice low and measured. But I need you to understand something. I stood there, not sure how to respond, my mind still reeling from the events of the day. He continued, what you did earlier wasn't just impressive. It was necessary. You saw something that no one else did. And because of you, we have a chance to move forward. His words lingered in the air between us, making me feel something I hadn't in a long time. Pride. I never expected someone like you to come along, he said, his voice softer now. Someone who could not only think on their feet, but who had the courage to speak up. You've got more to offer than I realized, Mia. My heart fluttered at his words. It wasn't often that someone like Dominic Valenti gave someone like me credit. I had been so used to being dismissed, ignored, and overlooked. But this felt different. Dominic's next words brought me back to reality. I've been thinking, he said, taking a step closer, about your offer, and I want you to know that I'm serious. I'm giving you a chance to prove yourself in ways that go beyond cleaning. I want you to be part of something bigger than this. His words were a promise, but the weight of that promise pressed on me. I had never been part of something bigger before, not in any real sense. I had always been a background player in other people's stories. But this was a chance to write my own narrative. I nodded slowly, still unsure of what the future held, but knowing I couldn't turn back now. I won't let you down, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Dominic gave me a small smile, and in that moment, I could see something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Trust. For the first time, it wasn't just about power or control. It was about something else, respect. Maybe even a hint of admiration. Good, he said, his voice firm once more. We'll start tomorrow. Meet me in the office at 8 a.m. He turned and started to walk away, but then he paused, glancing back over his shoulder. And Mia? I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. Thank you. You've earned this. The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the job or the position. It was about being seen, truly seen, for the first time. The next morning came too quickly. I found myself standing in front of Dominic's office, my heart pounding. The weight of the offer still hung over me, and I couldn't shake the nerves. What did he expect from me? What kind of challenge would he throw my way? I had no answers, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to back down. I had made it this far by trusting my instincts, by refusing to be invisible, and I wasn't about to stop now. I took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, and Dominic stood on the other side, waiting for me. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made me feel like I was about to step into a new world. Come in, Mia, he said, stepping aside. Let's get started. I walked in, the door clicking softly behind me. The room was filled with the usual luxury, leather chairs, polished wood, and bookshelves filled with expensive-looking volumes. But the atmosphere felt different now. It wasn't just about wealth and power. It was about something more. Opportunity. The opportunity to change everything. I've been reviewing a few things, Dominic said, settling into his chair behind the massive desk. And I want you to help me navigate some of the more complicated matters. It's going to take everything you've got, but I believe you're up to it. His words rang in my ears. I'm ready, I said, surprised at how confident I sounded. Dominic nodded, clearly pleased with my answer. Good. Then let's begin. What happened next was a whirlwind of decisions, papers, and strategies. I had no idea what I was doing half the time, but I learned quickly. Dominic didn't give me much time to doubt myself. He pushed me to think faster, to analyze harder, and to trust my instincts. And with every passing hour, I felt myself growing. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was someone with a role to play, someone who could shape the future of this empire. And with Dominic's support, I was beginning to believe that I could do it. I stepped into the office the next morning with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. The quiet hum of the mansion seemed to hold its breath as I walked past the marble pillars, through the lavish hallways, and into Dominic's study. The weight of what I had already achieved felt heavier today. I had helped him with a contract, something I never thought I would be capable of. But now, he was trusting me with something far more significant. As I walked in, Dominic was already sitting at his desk, eyes glued to the screen of his laptop. His gaze didn't leave the screen when he spoke. "Mia, come in." His voice was steady, but there was a shift in his tone. He was serious now, and so was I. "Take a seat," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. I did, my heart still racing, but I managed to keep my composure. "I've got a project for you," Dominic continued, without looking up. "One that requires your particular skills." My mind raced, but I didn't show it. The weight of this offer, this new responsibility, was starting to sink in. "What kind of project?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Dominic turned his chair slightly to face me, his eyes narrowing as if assessing my readiness. "You've seen how my family operates," he said. "How every business deal, every step, is calculated. But there's something we're missing. A hole in the operation that's been too dangerous to ignore." I felt a chill run through me. What was he getting at? "I want you to help me uncover it," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "There's someone inside my organization I don't trust. I need someone with your attention to detail to find the flaw, to find the weakness. You'll need to go through everything. Every transaction, every document, every conversation. We can't afford to miss anything." I swallowed hard. This was no longer just a small task. This was something much bigger. But I knew I couldn't back down now. "I'll do it," I said, my voice firm. Dominic studied me for a moment, as if weighing my response. Then he nodded. "Good. I'll have the files delivered to you. I want daily reports. If you find something, I want to know about it immediately." I nodded in agreement. "Understood." Dominic's expression softened, just slightly. "I'm glad I can count on you, Mia." His words meant more than I cared to admit. In that moment, I knew that this was my chance to prove myself in a way that went beyond the confines of this mansion. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was becoming an essential part of Dominic's empire. The next few days were a blur. The files poured in, stacks of documents, spreadsheets, and meeting transcripts filled my desk. The mansion's grand study felt like a distant memory as I sat in the small office in the service quarters, surrounded by piles of paper and the soft glow of a desk lamp. I dug in, my mind working overtime to piece together the information. It was overwhelming at first, but I was determined. Every page, every detail, held a clue. And then, I found it. A name, hidden deep within one of the financial documents, buried in the middle of a contract. A name I had seen before, in another context. The name of a competitor. A company that had been buying up properties Dominic had been trying to acquire. But that wasn't the most troubling part. The troubling part was the connections. There, in black and white, was evidence of an inside connection. Someone close to Dominic. Someone within his inner circle, funneling information to his rival. My breath caught in my throat. I had found the weakness. But the question was, what was I supposed to do with it? I stared at the name on the page, my mind racing. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about loyalty, trust, the very foundation of everything Dominic had built. And yet, here it was, a betrayal from someone within his own team. I felt a sense of responsibility wash over me. I had to tell him. But how? How would he react? Would he believe me? The stakes had never felt higher. As I sat there, the mansion's silence pressing in on me, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door to my office opened, and I looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but there was a sense of urgency in his eyes. "You found something, haven't you?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, I think I have." He walked into the room and closed the door behind him. "Show me." I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to present the information. But then, I realized there was no turning back. I handed him the document, the name circled in red. He studied it in silence for a moment, his jaw tightening. "This is," he trailed off, his words caught in his throat. He looked up at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded again. "I've double-checked everything. This person has been feeding information to our competitor. They've been undermining your deals." Dominic clenched his fists, his usual composure slipping for the first time since I had known him. "I can't believe this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I trusted them. The silence between us grew heavy. Finally, Dominic spoke again, his voice cold, controlled. "We need to take care of this. Now." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was part of something far bigger. And I knew, in that moment, that everything I did from here on out would change the course of Dominic's empire. The game had changed, and I was right in the middle of it. I stood in front of Dominic's desk, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. The name I had uncovered was still fresh in my mind, and I could see that Dominic was visibly shaken, though he was trying hard to maintain his usual composure. The quiet tension in the room made it feel as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. He was angry, but not just at the betrayal. There was a deep sense of hurt in his eyes, the kind of hurt that only comes from someone you trust letting you down. His gaze never left the document I had handed him. His fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling it slightly as his jaw clenched. "I trusted him," he muttered under his breath. It was more to himself than to me, but I could feel the weight of his words. I had never seen him so vulnerable, and it was unsettling. For a moment, he remained silent, staring at the name on the page, lost in his thoughts. I didn't dare interrupt, knowing that he needed to process it in his own way. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes dark with a storm of emotions. "We need to act quickly," he said, his voice firm but strained. "This person has been sabotaging me from the inside. If we don't deal with this immediately, we'll be exposed." I nodded, my heart racing. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Dominic had built an empire, and now someone within his inner circle had turned against him. I wasn't sure how far this went, but I knew one thing. I was going to help him fix it. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Dominic's gaze softened, just slightly, but it was enough to make me feel like I was truly seen for the first time. "I need you to keep digging. We can't just take this person's word for it. I want you to find every connection, every transaction, everything they've been involved in. If this goes deeper, I need to know. You're the only one I can trust to do this." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his trust settle on me. There was no turning back now. "I'll find out what I can," I promised. Dominic nodded and stood up, walking around the desk to stand next to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a rare gesture of support that made me feel like I was more than just a maid. "I know you will," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Don't let anyone know what you're doing. We can't afford to tip anyone off." I nodded, the seriousness of the situation not lost on me. "Understood." As I left the room, I felt a sense of determination rise within me. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was part of something much bigger, something that could change the future of this empire. But it wasn't just about the business. It was about loyalty, and I was going to show Dominic that I was loyal to him, no matter what. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly, poring over every document I could find. The mansion's luxurious halls seemed emptier as I buried myself in the task at hand. The information was overwhelming, but I was starting to piece things together. There were inconsistencies in the financial reports, strange transactions between Dominic's company and a rival. It wasn't just one person. It was a network, a group working together to undermine him. I knew that once I had enough evidence, I would need to confront Dominic with what I had found. But as the hours stretched on and I worked late into the night, something shifted. I realized I wasn't just doing this for him anymore. I was doing it for myself, too. I had never felt so alive, so capable. I had been underestimated for so long, dismissed as nothing more than a maid. But now I was part of something important. My mind worked faster than ever before, connecting dots and uncovering patterns that no one else had seen. This was my moment, and I was going to make the most of it. The days blurred together, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, I had it. The final piece of the puzzle. I found the person who had been feeding information to the rival company, one of Dominic's closest associates. I had the evidence, and I knew what I had to do next. I took a deep breath and walked back to Dominic's study. When I entered, he was at his desk, the weight of the situation still heavy on his shoulders. But when he saw me, he stood up, his eyes sharp and expectant. "Do you have it?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, walking toward him and handing him the file. "I found the person who's been working against you," I said quietly. Dominic's eyes scanned the contents of the file, his expression darkening with each passing second. "I knew it," he muttered, his voice thick with anger. He slammed the file down on the desk, his fist clenched tightly. "They will pay for this," he said, the determination in his voice unmistakable. I stood there, watching as Dominic processed the betrayal. He was no longer the man who had trusted everyone around him. This was a new side of him, a side that understood the consequences of loyalty and the price of betrayal. And in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, I was going to be right there by his side, ready to help him reclaim what was his. I stood in front of Dominic's desk, the weight of the betrayal still hanging heavily in the air. His eyes scanned the file I had handed him, the silence between us thick with anticipation. The last few days had been a whirlwind, and now, we were finally on the brink of confronting the person who had been undermining him from within. Dominic placed the file down and looked up at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "I should have seen this coming," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "How could I have trusted them?" His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the frustration simmering beneath. For the first time since I had met him, he looked vulnerable. I had seen him command entire rooms, his presence enough to make anyone fall in line. But now, in the quiet of his study, he was human. I could feel my heart race as I waited for him to speak again. He straightened up, his posture stiffening as his resolve returned. "We can't let this go unpunished. This is bigger than just a personal betrayal," he said, his voice firm. "This affects everything." I nodded, understanding the gravity of what we were dealing with. This wasn't just about one person's disloyalty. It was about trust, power, and the foundation that Dominic had spent years building. He was right. If we let this slide, the consequences would ripple through everything. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rising tension in my chest. Dominic's eyes flickered to me, his gaze softening for just a moment before hardening again. "We handle it quietly. I don't want any noise about this. No one else can know what's happening." He paused, his gaze intense. "I need you to take care of the details. You've already proven you can find the cracks others miss. This is your chance to show me exactly what you're capable of." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been working toward. The moment I could prove my worth. "I won't let you down," I said, my voice steady with resolve. Dominic gave me a nod of approval. "Good. Meet me in an hour. We'll go over the next steps." I turned and left the room, my mind racing with the implications of what was about to happen. The mansion, which had felt so imposing before, now seemed like a maze, each hallway a potential risk, each door a potential betrayal. I walked quickly, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors. I knew I had to move quickly. Dominic was right. We couldn't afford to waste any time. As I headed toward the office where the next phase of our plan would take place, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. I had been underestimated for so long. For most of my life, I had been invisible. But now, I was in the middle of something big, something that could change everything. Dominic had placed his trust in me, and I was going to prove that I was more than just a maid. When I arrived at the office, Dominic was already there, waiting. He didn't waste time. "We'll need to get close to the person who's been sabotaging us," he said, his voice low but urgent. "They've been playing a dangerous game. We can't let them think they're untouchable." I listened carefully, knowing that whatever we did next had to be calculated. "I'll need access to everything they've been involved in," he continued. "Financial records, personal contacts, the works. The more we know, the better our chances of exposing them." I nodded. "I'll start immediately." Dominic's gaze met mine, and there was something in his eyes, not just trust, but a quiet recognition. "You've earned your place here, Mia. Don't forget that." The words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about the job anymore. This was about loyalty, respect, and proving that I was capable of so much more than anyone had ever imagined. The next few days were a blur of research and quiet meetings, each piece of information slowly revealing the extent of the betrayal. It was worse than I had imagined. The person we were targeting had been deeply embedded in the organization, and the damage they had done was extensive. As I sifted through documents and analyzed patterns, I felt a growing sense of urgency. We had to act fast. Every moment we delayed, the closer they came to realizing we were onto them. Finally, after days of work, I had the last piece of the puzzle. The person responsible had been in contact with a competitor, leaking information and sabotaging Dominic's deals in an attempt to secure a more favorable position for themselves. It was a betrayal on a level I hadn't fully grasped until now. The stakes were higher than ever. I gathered the evidence and went to Dominic's study. When I entered, he was already waiting for me, his eyes sharp. "Do you have it?" he asked, his voice a mix of anticipation and resolve. I nodded, handing him the file. He skimmed through it, his eyes narrowing with each passing second. "This is worse than I thought," he said, his voice colder now. "But we can use this. We have everything we need." I waited as he set the file down on the desk, his expression unreadable. "We're going to bring them down," he said, his voice low but determined. "And we'll do it in a way they'll never see coming." The tension in the room was palpable as I stood there, knowing that this was the moment everything would change. We were about to take the fight to those who had betrayed him, and I was ready. No one would be underestimated anymore. I had never seen Dominic quite like this before. The usual calm, collected demeanor that he wore like armor had slipped away. His anger was palpable, and it was directed at someone who had once been trusted as part of his inner circle. This wasn't just a matter of business anymore. It was personal. As I stood in front of his desk, watching him sift through the files, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. It was like we were standing on the edge of something, and one wrong move could send us tumbling into a dangerous unknown. Dominic looked up from the papers, his eyes cold and calculating. "We have everything we need to expose them," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "But it won't be enough just to confront them. We have to make sure they never get the chance to do this again." His words hung in the air between us, a challenge that I couldn't ignore. I had already proven myself once, but this was different. This time, the stakes were much higher. "How do we handle it?" I asked, my voice low but determined. Dominic leaned back in his chair, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. "We make it clear that betrayal has consequences. Not just for them, but for anyone else who thinks they can cross me." His eyes locked onto mine, and there was a flicker of something I hadn't seen before: respect. "I want you to take the lead on this. You've earned that much." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't just helping him now. I was being trusted with a responsibility that I couldn't take lightly. "I won't let you down," I said, my voice steady even as the adrenaline surged through my veins. "I know you won't." He stood, moving around the desk to stand beside me. "We need to act quickly. We're going to confront them head on, but we'll do it in a way that sends a message. This ends now, Mia." I nodded, my mind racing with the possibilities. We had everything we needed, but it wasn't just about the confrontation. It was about making sure this never happened again, not just with this person, but with anyone who dared to think they could betray Dominic and get away with it. As we walked through the mansion, I could feel the tension in the air. The staff, the security, everyone seemed to sense that something was about to shift. Dominic was a force in this world, and anyone who had worked with him knew that his trust, once broken, was never easily repaired. He was a man of loyalty, and he expected the same in return. As we reached the small meeting room where the confrontation would take place, I could hear the quiet murmurs of the people gathered inside. Dominic had already set the stage for what was about to happen. He wasn't going to allow this betrayal to go unpunished, and he wanted the people in that room to know that. When we walked in, the silence that fell was deafening. Everyone stood, their eyes shifting between Dominic and me. I could feel the weight of their stares, but I kept my gaze fixed on Dominic. This was his fight, but I was part of it now. He motioned for everyone to sit, his expression unreadable. "We have a problem," Dominic began, his voice low but firm. "One of you has betrayed me, and I'm done with games." The room remained still, the air thick with tension. He looked around the room, his eyes locking onto each person before finally resting on the individual we had identified as the culprit. "You've been feeding information to our competitors," Dominic continued. "And for that, you will pay." The accused person shifted uncomfortably in their seat, But Dominic didn't let up. This ends today, not just for you, but for anyone who thinks they can cross me. Betrayal has consequences. The room fell silent once again, the weight of Dominic's words sinking in. I could feel the tension building, but I knew what needed to be done. Dominic wasn't just making a statement to the person in front of him. He was making sure everyone else knew what would happen if they ever thought about betraying him. The person tried to speak, but Dominic held up a hand, silencing them. "You've had your chance," he said, his voice ice cold. "Now, you'll face the consequences of your actions." With a single motion, he turned to the people around the table. "Take them out of here." The guards immediately moved in, escorting the person out of the room. Dominic didn't flinch as they left. He was a man who had seen his fair share of betrayals, but this one cut deeper than most. Once they were gone, Dominic turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "This is how we handle things now, Mia," he said quietly. "No one is above the rules. Not even the people I trusted the most." I nodded, understanding fully what he meant. This wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about loyalty, respect, and the price of betrayal. "I'll make sure this doesn't happen again," I promised. Dominic's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something more than just the Mafia boss in his gaze. I saw a man who had been hurt, but who still had the strength to rise above it. "I know you will," he said, his voice quieter now. "You've earned my trust, Mia." As we walked out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I had proven myself to Dominic, and in doing so, I had become more than just a maid. I was a part of something much bigger now, and whatever happened next, I knew I would never be underestimated again. I woke up early the next morning, the weight of the previous day's events still lingering in my mind. The confrontation with the traitor had been swift and decisive, but Dominic's words still echoed. In my head, no one is above the rules. His trust in me had been cemented, but I knew the path ahead was going to be anything but easy. The mansion was quiet when I stepped out of my room. The usual sounds of bustling staff and morning activity muted, almost as if everyone was waiting for the fallout. I made my way down the hallway, my thoughts consumed with what came next. Dominic had given me a responsibility, one that I wasn't sure I was fully ready for, but it was a chance. A chance to prove that I was capable of so much more than I had ever been given credit for. As I approached his office, I took a deep breath. I had to keep focused. This wasn't about the past. It was about what I was going to do now. I knocked softly on the door before entering. Dominic was sitting at his desk, his usual air of control in place, but there was something different about him today. A quiet determination radiated from him, and I could feel the weight of the empire resting on his shoulders. "Mia," he said, looking up from the papers in front of him. "Come in. We have work to do." I nodded and walked over to the chair across from him. "What's next?" I asked, ready for whatever he was going to throw at me. Dominic didn't hesitate. "Now that we've handled the internal betrayal, it's time to turn our attention outward. We have a rival company that's been getting too close to our operations. They've been trying to undercut us at every turn, and I need you to find out everything you can about them." His voice was steady, but I could hear the undertone of urgency. "I want you to gather intel, not just on their business dealings, but on the people behind it. Who's funding them? Who's pulling the strings? I want to know it all." The task was daunting, but it wasn't new to me. I had spent my entire life observing, listening, and piecing together things that others overlooked. This was just another puzzle, and I was more than capable of solving it. "I'll get on it right away," I said, my resolve strengthening with each passing moment. Dominic's eyes softened for a brief second. "I know you will," he said, before his tone hardened again. "And Mia, this isn't just business. This is personal. I need to know that when you're working on this, you're doing it with everything you've got." His words hung in the air, the weight of his trust heavy on my shoulders. I wasn't just helping him now. I was becoming an integral part of his world, and I couldn't afford to fail. I nodded. "You won't regret it," I promised, my voice steady. "I won't let anyone get away with this." Dominic gave a small nod of approval before turning back to the papers in front of him. "Good. I'll be expecting updates regularly. Don't leave anything to chance." I left the room with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt before. The halls of the mansion, which had once seemed so imposing, now felt like a place where I truly belonged. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was a vital part of this operation, and I would prove myself. The next few days passed in a blur of research, meetings, and late nights spent sifting through data. I found myself diving into the business world with a fervor I hadn't known I was capable of. Every document I uncovered, every detail I analyzed, brought me closer to understanding the full scope of the rival company's operations. It was bigger than I thought. There were layers of deception, hidden connections, and people who had been pulling strings from the shadows. But I was getting closer. One night, as I was reviewing financial records, I found a crucial link, a name that kept appearing in the transactions. A name I knew all too well. It was a name tied to Dominic's past, someone who had once been a trusted ally but had fallen out of favor years ago. This was the connection I had been searching for. It wasn't just about the rival company. It was about someone close to Dominic who had turned their back on him. My pulse quickened as I pieced together the final connection. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I walked into Dominic's office, the file in my hand. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice low. I handed him the file, my fingers trembling slightly. He opened it and scanned the contents, his expression growing, darker with each passing moment. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is the person who's been behind it all." I watched as his fingers tightened around the paper, his jaw clenching. The room was silent as Dominic processed the information. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes burning with determination. "We take care of this. Now." His words were a command, and I knew exactly what he meant. It was time to confront the person who had been trying to destroy everything he had built. But this time, we weren't going to let them get away with it. This time, we were going to make sure they paid the price for their betrayal. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady. Dominic stood and walked to the door, his steps measured. "Prepare yourself, Mia. This is about to get complicated." But I wasn't afraid. I had already proven my loyalty, and now it was time to show Dominic that I could stand beside him, no matter what. I walked into Dominic's office, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. The file I had handed him last night had opened up a world of betrayal, and now we were at the precipice of taking action. Dominic was already standing by the window, looking out over the sprawling estate. His sharp, calculating gaze seemed to pierce through the distance as he processed everything that had led us to this point. I could feel the weight of the moment settle over me, but I refused to let doubt take hold. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I would prove my loyalty and my worth. "Mia," Dominic said, his voice low but firm. "We have to handle this carefully. We can't let this person get away with what they've done, but we also need to make sure no one else gets caught in the crossfire." His words were deliberate, each one calculated to make sure I understood the gravity of what we were about to do. I nodded, my mind already racing through the possibilities. We had the evidence, but now we needed to make sure it was handled with precision. "I understand," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves that were building in my chest. "I'll make sure everything is in place before we take action." Dominic turned to face me, his gaze intense. "This isn't just about business, Mia. This is personal. We're not just taking down a rival or a traitor. We're sending a message to anyone who thinks they can cross me." His eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel the fire in them. "You've proven yourself to me. But now, I need you to trust me. This is bigger than anything we've done before." I met his gaze, not backing down. "I trust you, Dominic," I said, my voice unwavering. Dominic's expression softened slightly, a flicker of approval crossing his features. "Good. Then let's get to work." The next few hours were a blur of activity. We worked quietly, each of us focused on the task at hand. Dominic was meticulous, leaving no detail unchecked, and I was right there beside him, coordinating everything that needed to be done. I had never felt more alive, more driven. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, but it wasn't just fear or excitement. It was purpose. I was a part of something bigger than myself, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. By the time we had everything in place, I knew the next move would be crucial. Dominic had the plan, and I was ready to execute it. We had a meeting scheduled with the person who had been behind the betrayal. It was time to confront them, to expose everything they had been trying to hide. Dominic and I arrived at the discreet location where we would meet. The room was dimly lit, the atmosphere thick with tension. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me, but I didn't flinch. I had already proven I was capable of handling pressure. The person we were about to meet was one of Dominic's former associates, someone who had once been trusted but had turned against him. Their betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and loyalty. It was a personal attack on everything Dominic had worked for. As we entered the room, the person was already sitting at the table, waiting. They looked up, their eyes narrowing when they saw us. There was no warmth, no hint of recognition, just cold, calculating indifference. Dominic took a seat across from them, his expression unreadable. I stood beside him, silent, watching. "I know why you're here," the person said, their voice dripping with arrogance. "But you're wasting your time. You can't stop what's already in motion." Dominic leaned forward, his voice low but deadly. "I don't think you understand. You've been playing a dangerous game, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." The person's eyes flickered for just a moment, a hint of fear breaking through their confident facade. But it was gone as quickly as it had come. "You think you can just take everything back?" they sneered. "You've lost. This empire of yours is crumbling." Dominic's gaze hardened, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You've underestimated me, and you've underestimated my people. I'm not going to let you destroy everything I've built." There was a tense silence in the room as the weight of his words settled over us. The person shifted in their seat, clearly uneasy now, but still defiant. Dominic's next words were the final blow. "You're finished. I have everything I need to bring you down. Your moves, your connections, your deals, they all lead back to you. The game is over." The person's face twisted in anger, but there was a trace of fear in their eyes. It was the fear of knowing that the power they once had was slipping away. "You can't do this," they spat. "You have no idea what I've planned." Dominic's voice was cold, final. "I don't need to know your plans. I've already won." With that, he stood, signaling for the meeting to end. The person was left sitting at the table, their world crumbling around them. As we walked out of the room, I could feel the tension begin to lift. Dominic had taken control, and now, it was time for everything to fall into place. We had exposed the traitor, and we had sent a message that no one would dare cross him again. I had proven myself once more, and Dominic knew it. But as we left the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. I had never seen Dominic like this before. As we walked away from the meeting with his former associate, the air felt heavy with unspoken words, and yet, there was something unmistakably satisfying about the way everything was unfolding. The traitor had been exposed, their fate sealed, and Dominic's empire was secure, but the battle wasn't over. It couldn't be. This was just one chapter in a much larger story. Dominic's usual composure was replaced by a palpable sense of urgency, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind as we made our way back to the mansion. His steps were quicker, more deliberate. The silence between us stretched out, but I wasn't about to break it. I had learned by now that Dominic's mind worked at a level that was hard for most people to grasp. He wasn't just reacting to what had happened. He was already planning for the next move. When we reached his office, he didn't waste time. "We've dealt with one problem," he said, his voice quiet but full of intent. "But we can't stop here. We need to eliminate the threat completely. We need to make sure no one else thinks they can betray me." His words were like a command, and I could feel the weight of his expectations settling onto my shoulders. But this time, there was no fear. I was ready. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, meeting his gaze. His eyes were dark, calculating. "You've already proven you can handle yourself," he said, his voice steady. "Now, I need you to dig deeper. We need to find out who else is involved. There are too many loose ends, and I'm not leaving anything to chance." I nodded, my mind already racing with the possibilities. This was no longer just about one person. It was about the network they had built, the people who had supported them, and the threat that still loomed over us. "I'll get to work right away," I said, my voice firm. "I won't let you down." Dominic's lips twitched into something that almost resembled a smile. "I know you won't," he said, before turning back to the papers on his desk. I left the room with a sense of determination. As I made my way down the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all leading up to something even bigger than I had anticipated. The mansion, which had always felt so imposing, now felt like a maze. Every hallway, every room, seemed filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. The stakes had been raised, and now, I had to prove that I was more than just a bystander in this world. I was a part of it. I spent the next few days poring over documents, meeting with people who had information, and tracking down leads. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how far the betrayal had spread. The rival company wasn't just a business competitor. They had been working with people inside Dominic's organization, leveraging connections to weaken his influence. There was more to this than just corporate sabotage. It was about power and control. But I couldn't let myself be distracted by the scope of it all. My focus had to remain sharp. I had already uncovered a few key players, but I needed to know more. I needed to find the mastermind behind it all. One night, as I sifted through a stack of files, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. A name. It was buried in a confidential report from one of Dominic's former associates. The name was tied to a series of transactions that had been flagged as suspicious, deals made in the shadows, under the radar of normal business operations. I felt a surge of excitement. This was it. This was the breakthrough I needed. I printed the file and went straight to Dominic's office. When I entered, he was sitting at his desk, looking over some papers. His eyes met mine, and I could tell he knew something was different. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I handed him the file, my heart pounding in my chest. He scanned it quickly, his eyes narrowing as he read. "This is the lead I've been waiting for," he said, his voice sharp with recognition. "This is the person pulling the strings." I could feel my pulse quicken as Dominic's gaze met mine. "We're going to take them down. I need you to get everything you can on this person. We're not just exposing them. We're making sure they can never hurt me again." His words hit me with a sense of finality. I wasn't just helping him anymore. I was in this with him. We were in this together. "I'll take care of it," I said, my voice steady despite the rising tension. Dominic gave a single nod, his expression hardening. "Good. This ends now." I left the office, the sense of purpose surging through me stronger than ever. This was bigger than just a betrayal. It was about power, trust, and loyalty, things that were sacred to Dominic. I knew what had to be done, and I wasn't going to stop until I had exposed the full extent of the plot against him. As I worked, I felt the walls of the mansion close in on me once more, but this time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like home. This was my world now, and I was going to make sure no one ever crossed Dominic again. I had never seen Dominic so focused. The hours we spent in his office after I handed him the breakthrough were a blur of plans, strategies, and quiet intensity. He didn't waste time. Every moment was critical now. With the name of the person behind it all in our hands, there was no turning back. We weren't just going to expose the betrayal. We were going to ensure that it was wiped out completely, with no room left for anyone else to try and undermine Dominic's empire. I had been deep in research for the past few days, tracking down every lead, sifting through old financial statements, business dealings, and even personal records. It was a dangerous game we were playing, but Dominic's trust in me had only grown stronger, and that gave me the determination to finish what we had started. I had found another key piece of information in one of the competitors' files. It was an encrypted email, but with some persistence, I had cracked it. Inside were details about a secret meeting set to take place in a secluded location, a meeting between the traitor and another person from within Dominic's inner circle. The evidence was clear now. This was bigger than just a business rivalry. It was about manipulation, power, and a plot that threatened to destroy everything Dominic had built. When I walked into Dominic's office with the new information, he didn't look up immediately. He was already on the phone, talking in a low voice, giving commands that made it clear he was preparing for something big. But when I placed the file down on his desk, his eyes flicked to it instantly. "What is it?" he asked, his voice still calm, but carrying a sense of urgency. I stood beside his desk, ready to brief him on what I had uncovered. "I found something," I said, my voice steady despite the rising tension. "There's another meeting, between the traitor and someone else from your team. It's scheduled to happen soon, and it's connected to the rival company." Dominic's expression hardened as he took in the information. He closed the file with a snap, his mind already working through the next move. "We can't let this meeting happen," he said, his voice full of resolve. "We take action now. We don't give them the chance to act against us." "How do you want to handle it?" I asked, my heart pounding as I felt the weight of the decision hanging over us. Dominic stood up, moving to the side of his desk, his gaze focused and unyielding. "We don't just stop them. We send a message. A strong one. It's time to deal with this once and for all." The plan was set. We would stop the meeting, expose the traitor and anyone involved in their scheme, and make sure that everyone in the room understood the cost of betrayal. We didn't just want to take down the enemy. We wanted to make it clear that no one would ever dare cross Dominic again. The next few hours were a blur of preparations. Dominic's security team was already moving into place, ready to intercept the meeting before it even had a chance to begin. I had my part to play, and I wasn't about to hesitate. We arrived at the location, a secluded estate hidden in the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with tension as we made our way inside, the sense of anticipation building with every step. Dominic's presence in the room was undeniable, his every move calculated, every word deliberate. We stood by, waiting for the signal to act. And then it came. We moved swiftly, silently, catching the traitor and the others off guard. The look in their eyes as they realized they were trapped was almost satisfying. They had thought they could escape, that their actions would go unnoticed. But Dominic had seen through their scheme from the start. As we gathered the evidence and took control of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This wasn't just about loyalty anymore. It was about doing what was right, about proving that no one was untouchable, not even those who thought they could operate from the shadows. The traitor was finally exposed for what they were, their plans unraveling before their eyes. It was over. Dominic stood tall, watching as everything fell into place. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation. He had been tested, and he had come out on top. But as the dust settled, I could see the quiet satisfaction in his expression. This was the moment he had been working toward. The betrayal was gone, and with it, the threat that had loomed over his empire. And now, we had taken back control. This is just the beginning, Dominic said quietly, his gaze meeting mine. There will always be people trying to take us down. But as long as we stay ahead, as long as we keep our eyes open, we'll win. Every time. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. This wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. A declaration that Dominic Valenti and his empire weren't to be underestimated. I wasn't just his maid anymore. I was part of this world. And as long as I stood by his side, I knew that nothing could tear us apart. I stood in the quiet of Dominic's study, the weight of the past few days hanging heavily in the air. The traitor had been dealt with, the threat removed, and the empire was safe, for now. But Dominic wasn't done. He never was. He had proven himself time and time again. But now, there was a new tension in the air, a new focus in his eyes. You did well, he said quietly, his voice low but filled with sincerity. You've earned your place in this world, Mia. I could feel my pulse quicken at his words. It wasn't just a compliment. It was validation. For so long, I had been invisible, overlooked. But now, I was standing here, in this room, beside Dominic Valenti. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was a key player in his world. Thank you, I said softly, the words feeling too small to capture everything I was feeling. But Dominic wasn't the type to linger on pleasantries. We can't stop now, he continued, his voice hardening. There's more to be done. We've removed the traitor, but we still have a bigger enemy to face. And it's not just about business. It's about survival. His words sent a chill down my spine. I had seen the way he operated, calculated, precise, relentless. But this time, it felt different. The stakes had never been higher. What's the next step? I asked, my voice steady, my resolve unwavering. Dominic's gaze met mine, his eyes intense. We take the fight to them. We go after the people behind the rival company. The ones who've been pulling the strings all along. The tension in the room tightened as he spoke. We're not just playing defense anymore. We're going on the offensive. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. This wasn't just about protecting what Dominic had built. It was about attacking the source of the problem, taking the fight to those who had been working behind the scenes. And I was ready for it. I'm with you, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. Dominic nodded, a rare flicker of approval crossing his features. I know you are, he said quietly. That's why I need you in the field with me. We're going to move fast, and we're going to move together. The plan was simple, but deadly. We would infiltrate the rival company, gather intel, and expose the people behind the power play. We wouldn't just shut them down. We would destroy their operation, make sure they never had the chance to come after Dominic again. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Dominic's operation was vast, but we moved with precision, each step calculated, each move deliberate. I was no longer just in the background. I was front and center, working with Dominic's inner circle, gathering information, and coordinating with the people who made everything happen. I had proven my worth, And now, I was more than just a witness to Dominic's world. I was a part of it. As we closed in on the rival company, the tension only increased. Every lead we followed, every piece of intel we uncovered, brought us closer to the people we were after. The trail was complex, but I could see the connections falling into place, like pieces of a puzzle. And then, we found it. The mastermind. The person who had been orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. I didn't recognize the name at first, but when I saw the connection to Dominic's past, everything clicked. It was someone Dominic had trusted once, someone who had been close to him, but who had turned their back. It was personal. And now we had them. Dominic's expression darkened as he processed the information. I should have known, he muttered, his jaw clenched. This was never just about business. It was about power, control. He paused, his gaze meeting mine. And now it's time to take it back. We had the evidence. We had the plan. And we were ready. Dominic's security team was already moving into place, and I could feel the final moments before everything would come to a head. This was the part where the battle would be won or lost. As we prepared for the final move, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This wasn't just about taking down the enemy. It was about reclaiming control. It was about making sure that no one, not even those who thought they could operate from the shadows, would ever cross Dominic again. The hours ticked by, each one bringing us closer to the confrontation. I was no longer just the one watching from the sidelines. I was in the thick of it. And as the final plan was set into motion, I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just Dominic's fight. It was mine, too. We arrived at the location, a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. It looked like any other office complex, but I knew better. This was where everything would be decided. I looked over at Dominic, who gave me a small nod. Stay close, he said, his voice low but full of command. We move fast. No mistakes. I nodded, my heart racing. This was it. We moved through the building with precision, silent and swift, our footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. Every moment was charged with purpose. We were about to confront the mastermind, and nothing would stand in our way. The door to the office opened with a quiet click. Inside, the mastermind was waiting, but they weren't alone. There was no turning back now. The fight for control had just begun. The moment we stepped into the room, the atmosphere was charged. Dominic and I had worked tirelessly to get to this point, and now, standing in front of the mastermind who had orchestrated the betrayal, I could feel the weight of what was at stake. The room was cold, sterile, and silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. The mastermind sat at the desk, their back to us, as though they knew we were coming, yet did nothing to prepare for the confrontation. Dominic wasted no time. You thought you could play both sides, he said, his voice firm and filled with authority. But now, you're going to learn the consequences. The mastermind slowly turned around in their chair, a smug expression painted on their face. You're too late, they said, their voice dripping with arrogance. The plans are already in motion. You can't stop what's already set in place. I could see Dominic's jaw tighten as he stepped forward, his gaze never leaving the traitor. You think you've won? He asked, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. You're wrong. You're about to lose everything you've worked for. The air between us seemed to crackle with tension. I stood beside Dominic, my heart racing as I watched the two of them stare each other down. The mastermind had no idea how much they had underestimated him. You should have known better, Dominic continued, his voice calm but full of threat. People like you don't get away with betrayal. Not in my world. The mastermind's confident smirk faltered for just a moment, but it was enough to show that they knew they were in trouble. Dominic didn't give them time to recover. We know everything, he said, pulling out a stack of documents. Your deals, your contacts, everything. You're finished. The traitors stood up from their desk, their hands trembling as they reached for the folder. You're bluffing, they spat, but their voice wavered slightly, betraying the doubt in their mind. Dominic took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. No, he said quietly, I'm not bluffing. This ends now. The traitors' eyes darted to the door, looking for an escape, but they knew it was over. There was no way out. I could see the fear creeping into their eyes as they realized that Dominic had already won. This was their downfall. We had prepared for this moment, and they had no idea how much they had underestimated Dominic's power. The feeling of victory was almost tangible, but it wasn't over yet. Dominic had never been one to let a traitor go unpunished. You thought you could play the game and get away with it, he said, his voice cutting through the silence. But now, you'll pay the price for your betrayal. You won't destroy everything I've built. With a swift motion, Dominic reached into his jacket and pulled out a document, a legally binding agreement that would ensure the traitor's downfall. The mastermind's face drained of color as they realized what was happening. They had no choice now. You're done, Dominic said, his voice final. The world you tried to build on lies and deception is collapsing. You're going to lose everything. The traitors stood motionless, their mind racing, but it was too late. Dominic had outplayed them at every turn. They had been outsmarted, and they had no way of stopping the inevitable. As Dominic handed the document to the traitor, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. We had done what needed to be done. The empire was secure, and the betrayer was about to face the consequences of their actions. Dominic turned to me. His expression softened just slightly. We've done it, he said, his voice low but filled with a sense of accomplishment. The threat is over. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. We had fought together, and now we had won. But even as I felt that satisfaction, I knew the game wasn't truly over. There would always be new challenges, new threats to face. Dominic had built an empire, but it was never going to be easy to protect. What now? I asked, looking up at him. He turned, his eyes meeting mine, and for a brief moment, I saw something other than the calculating, powerful leader I had always known. There was something human in his gaze, a sense of relief, of closure. Now, we rebuild, he said, his voice steady, and we make sure no one ever thinks they can cross us again. As we left the room, the sound of the door closing behind us felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The empire had been threatened, but now, it was stronger than ever. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was part of something much bigger. And with Dominic at the helm, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together, stronger than before. In this gripping tale, the world of betrayal, trust, and power collide in a high-stakes battle that will captivate fans of romance stories. The journey of Mia, a maid who rises to prominence in the world of Dominic Valenti, a powerful Mafia boss, unfolds in a series of intense twists and emotional moments. As Mia uncovers deep-rooted betrayals and uncovers secrets that threaten to destroy everything Dominic has built, her relationship with him transforms from one of mere loyalty to something much deeper. Romance stories like this one reveal the complexities of trust, love, and the fight for justice in a dangerous world. As they confront the masterminds behind the rival company, Mia and Dominic share a bond that grows stronger with each challenge they face together. The stakes are high, and every decision matters in the face of betrayal and deception. This narrative dives deep into the emotional evolution of both characters, blending thrilling action with moments of tenderness. If you enjoy romance stories that feature fierce loyalty and personal growth amidst danger, this story will pull you in from the start. With every turn, the tension builds, leading to a satisfying resolution that leaves you wanting more. Romance stories with characters who fight for each other, no matter the cost, are always the most compelling, and this one is no exception. Witness the evolution of Mia and Dominic as they conquer not only their enemies, but also the complexities of their evolving relationship.